After a grueling 6 weeks and a brutal matchup with South Carolina, Vandy is in desperate need of a recharge with this bye week.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Vandy did not snap the 15-game losing streak. They pushed it to 16 with the 28-7 loss to South Carolina. Offensively, they just couldn't get much going. Defensively, they didn't have many answers for Rocket Sanders, but most importantly, the bye week comes at a perfect time because this team is beat up and has a much-needed recharge in all aspects of the program. So here's the deal. With Vandy, you could see it coming, right? You could see it coming the last couple of weeks. It just seemed like they were out of gas, right? And fortunately for them, Auburn is pretty bad, and then they're in rough shape right now. So they were able to pull out that win and do enough in that game to overcome some of that fatigue. But a team like South Carolina rolls in, and if you're a little bit beat up, they're going to take full advantage, and they did. And they did a good job of taking full advantage. So, again, like I said in my quick reaction, I tipped my cap to South Carolina. They did everything they should have. They took full advantage of Vandy being beat up, and they just wore on them throughout the first half. And then the second half, boom, they were able to hit big plays, and they were able to push that lead to 28-7. So South Carolina did everything right. They're red hot right now in the SEC, and I was impressed by the way they played. And it was a remarkably different team this past game than they were in week one, than they were even against LSU, because they couldn't finish that game. Like, they played well enough, and then they just kind of fell apart at the end. That was the team that dominated Oklahoma. That was the team that beat Texas A&M and dominated Texas A&M. Like that, that was what this South Carolina team is and was capable of. And I wasn't sure exactly what they were capable of, because you don't know how a freshman quarterback is going to respond throughout the course of an SEC season. You just don't. And they responded really, really well. But the fact remains is that Vandy, and this is not an excuse, and this is not to take anything away from what South Carolina did, because South Carolina did everything that you needed to against a team that's just worn out. South Carolina obviously had more depth, and they were able to lean on that depth. So Vandy, they're just not. And this was something when I looked at that middle six, that run of 6 weeks of that Vandy just completed. When I looked at that part of the schedule, I was a little worried. I was like, well, this is where the depth is going to come into play. This is where they're going to test it. This is where they're going to get tested here. The strength and conditioning program is going to be tested and put on full display here. And I thought they played admirably, given the fact that their roster just isn't built yet to withstand the rigors of an SEC season. You can see they're starting to hit that decline a little bit, and they just flat ran out of gas, man. They played well in the first quarter, and then that was you saw it drop off, and you're like, oh boy, this, hopefully South Carolina keeps us in this, but it's, it was bad. And it was a noticeable drop off. So this week couldn't come at a better time, because the final two games, LSU and Tennessee, those games are games that, at the beginning of the season, I would have said no shot. But given the fact that Nico is beat up for Tennessee, and LSU is, I don't know what they are, to be honest. That team just baffles me. I have no words to describe them right now. That Alabama game was awful for them. So you got two beatable teams right now. And Tennessee, didn't really put away Mississippi State. And Mississippi State's pretty bad, right? They're well coached. You could tell they're well coached. They play hard. They've got some guys that are performing way above their heads, but they're just not a good team right now. And, Jeff Lebby was not dealt a great hand. So he's doing the best that he can with that group. It's just not much. So needless to say, like, this team can get healthy and they have a chance. Now, going into Death Valley is not, your chances probably aren't as great going into that place. But if it's an 11 a.m. kick and you got Diego Pavia, you always got a chance. Against Tennessee, bitter rivals, every bit of conventional wisdom gets thrown out the window in that matchup, especially lately. I mean, historically, no, but lately, yes. Or in recent history, not last year. Last year was kind of pathetic. But needless to say, like, this is where this team needs. They need to focus on recharging, right? Fix the mistakes that plagued you, and I think a lot of mistakes are just you just broke down physically. I think a lot of it was you broke down physically. I think you couldn't. I think this offense couldn't execute the basics because they were exhausted. They couldn't protect. They couldn't create run lanes. There was a lot of things they couldn't do because they were physically exhausted. And I don't know, like, if a fresher team would have performed better against that South Carolina defense. I don't know, because that South Carolina defense is so incredibly talented that they just erase a lot of problems. They might not be very good in coverage. They might not be a very good communications team. We don't know, because Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart erase a lot of things for that defense. So we don't know what this offense could have done legitimately, but I seem to think that it would have been more consistent. And I just don't know. And I don't know that the play calling was there in this game. I think Tim Beck was calling plays like we were a tired bunch, just trying to get to the bye week and just trying to hopefully to create something based on, from our base packages and just letting Diego do what Diego does. Right. And so it's just one of those things where I'm just not sure how this game would have went had this been 4 weeks ago. Right. I don't know if South Carolina was in the right place mentally and physically 4 weeks ago. Vandy could have been fresher and this game could have been different. I don't know. But what I do know is I'm interested to see kind of what fascinates me is I'm kind of ready to see just how they construct this week of practice, right? I wonder if it's going to be a lot of above the neck stuff, some lighter things, some recuperation type situations, things to keep yourself physically able to finish the season through the bowl game, which is something that's new for them. Is there going to be a lot of like mental reps? Is there going to be a lot of film work? Are they going to cut down practice days? Like, I wonder how they're going to do it. This is new territory for them. They've never been in a situation to where it matters, right? Because last year it didn't really matter. They could have done whatever. It would not have mattered. They probably needed to go physical. But man, this team has been a really physical bunch, and they've been hitting each other. They've been pounding, and they've been going at it. So this would be a much needed reprieve there, I think, for Diego Pavia, for Cedric Alexander. Miles Capers can get well. Some of these guys, Zaylen Wood, can hopefully heal. Maybe Mr. Miyagi can come with his magic, like he does. But whatever the case may be, I think there's just a lot of recuperation in order for this Vandy football team, because they've had a great run. I mean, they went 4-2 over the middle six, right? They won 4 games to make themselves bowl eligible. I mean, this team did a really good job over that middle 6 games, right? And they really put themselves on the map. They earned a lot of respect, even in the losses. And even in a 28-7 loss, I feel like they got themselves to a place to where teams are like, yeah, like we may have, like South Carolina probably walked out there going, yeah, we may have won 28-7, but good Lord, We had to earn that one, and they earned it all right. They absolutely earned it. And they just did a good job of wearing Vandy down, and that was the difference in the ball game. So, that simply put, I'm going to get more into how and why they broke them down offensively and defensively. It's report card time, so the grades are out. We'll see what we're working on coming into the bye week from a football standpoint. We'll see how I stacked up on my picks, and we'll see how the outcomes played into the keys of the game. We'll do all of that next. All right, this episode is presented by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, welcome back. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. If you need a second listen or even a third listen, you should go check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy does a phenomenal job there as he breaks down everything from around the league, and trust me, he's got plenty to talk about this week. And if you really want some entertainment, you should check out Locked On Ole Miss this week. They just beat Georgia. They dominated Georgia, really. They didn't just beat them; they dominated them. And so Steve Willis is. Yeah, it's going to be a hell of a week over there. So congrats to you, Steve, on that big win. And Steve's gonna have fun with this. If you want some entertainment, just jump on over there soon at the conclusion of this episode. So, but anyway, so how did I do? How did Vandy do? How did we do on our picks? Okay, I'll get to my picks last, but here's the recap. Here's the tail of the tape. We'll break this all down. Okay. South Carolina final score 28-7. Total yards 452 to 274. 214 of those for South Carolina were on the ground. 100 to 108 of Vandy. 238 yards through the air to Vandy's 166. 25 first downs to Vandy's 17. They each had a turnover, and the time of possession was just about dead even, 30-59 to 29-01. So that was, this game proved one thing. South Carolina can run the ball, and we'll I'm gonna get to that here in just a second. Okay, so they can run the ball, and that was a big difference here. Like the second half, big plays, and they you could see it slowly building like that. I thought they had a pretty good game plan against Rocket Sanders. I think they had some things in mind that they wanted to do, but they just could not tackle him. They just couldn't get to him. I think South Carolina, the big plays just racked up. I think they did a good job early of forcing them to drive, which was one of the keys to the game. But this was something that, again, South Carolina found ways. They were patient. That's the big thing about South Carolina is they were patient, right? And good teams are patient, okay? Then this team is well coached. I think Shane Beamer, this is probably his best coaching year because he had some challenges at the beginning of this season. He didn't have Spencer Rattler. He probably had his worst offensive line that he's ever had. He had an anonymous wide receiver group, and even talking to Chris Marler last week, he said this group really hasn't done much as a unit. And so you didn't really know what impact these wide receivers would have and what impact Lenore Sellers would have with this offensive line. There was a lot of question marks. Defensively, you knew the defensive front was going to be phenomenal, and that was going to probably going to carry you in a lot of situations. But yeah, I don't think anybody would have said that South Carolina was going to be this red hot at this point in the season. I know I wouldn't have, but Shane Beamer's done a great job, and he did a great job of feeding Rocket Sanders. I think Dowell Loggins has improved throughout the season as a coordinator. I think he's getting a better feel for the game. I think he's the way he's calling is just lets me know that it's more of a natural flow, more of like a hey, I kind of understand here. Like, hey, they don't have many answers for Rocket Sanders, and even when they do, it still takes 2 or 3 of them to bring him down because he's a big dude and he wears on you. So they played into that. They wore this defense down. They were patient. Didn't get a whole lot of points in the first half, only 7 points in the first half. They had a couple opportunities. They missed a field goal, and they just got just up to the scoring zone and couldn't quite break that threshold. But Vandy's defense had a good game plan, and South Carolina just wore them down. And that was the tail of the tape. I mean, you had 214 yards rushing, and I think it's notable to say that, hey, this is, again, a lot of those yards came in the second half. I'd like to see the split stats on that, but this is a team that they just understood what the assignment was. I mean, they understood that, hey, we got a job to do. I mean, Sanders had 15 carries for 126 yards. He averaged 8 per carry. He had a long of 39. Lenore Sellers had 13 carries himself. Not a ton of yardage, but he had 13 carries. And Rocket Sanders had 2 catches for 52 yards. That had a big day. So that was something that was interesting. They found, that's obviously their best player. So Vandy didn't have much option for him. They did a good job of hiding him in the pass game. He had those 2 catches. That 43-yard touchdown was a beautifully designed play to get him open, and there was just nothing there. And they just torpedoed, man. And this is a testament of, this is not really, to me, like when you evaluate Vandy's defense, you see a score like 28-7. You're like, good Lord, they played like crap. They gave up 28 points. Like what's going on here? But in reality, like if you really watch this game, I thought Vandy's defense played admirably. I despite the score being the way it was, I thought they did a good job for the most part of getting guys in position. But the later the game went, they just couldn't tackle. And that was, obviously that's the foundation of the sport of football. It's tackling, but they had guys there. They knew what South Carolina wanted to do. Aside from a couple of plays where I thought South Carolina had some perfect play calls at perfect times, and they were well designed. I think for the most part, Vandy made them work. They made them earn, especially in the first half. They made them earn all those yards. They had they had guys there, and a lot of times they were just tired, couldn't make tackle. They'd miss it or they'd hit, and Rocket Sanders would plow forward for another 2 or 3 yards before they brought him down. So instead of 2nd 10, it's 2nd 7 if they hit him at the line of scrimmage. And it's just, again, it goes back to Vandy played well enough to win the game up until about midway through the third quarter. And then that's when the dam broke. They played well enough, but South Carolina played better, right? Vandy played well. South Carolina played better. And that was the name of this game. I think if you look at the score and be like, yeah, I don't think anybody's going to say, yeah, Vandy sucks. No, they don't suck. They just don't have enough depth to withstand somebody like Rocket Sanders, to withstand an explosive team like South Carolina, right? They just don't have it. And that's more of a, hey, we're not there yet, but we see that we're playing hard, and we've given ourselves a chance with what we've got. We've got a good defensive play caller. We've got somebody that's going to get us in position that makes us look like we know what we're trying to do. It just, as the game wore on, their ability to do it became less and less. And South Carolina capitalized on that, and that's what they absolutely should have done. And if they didn't, I would have been more worried about South Carolina. But South Carolina just went out and said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to outplay Vandy, and it's not going to matter." And Vandy had some problems, and South Carolina had some problems. But for the most part, I thought this was a really good game between two really good teams. And I think that it sucks that somebody had to lose this game. It sucks that Vandy had to lose it for the 16th straight time because, at the start of this game, you're like, oh, gosh, we're still in this thing, right? This defense is holding. The offense is kind of starting to figure some things out. And, they almost got down there and scored right before half, but they just couldn't quite get there. But this they had a chance. They turned over Lenora Sellers, and they had a chance to put one across early in the game to break the scoring, and Kyle Kennard made a play. He made a play. Kennard made a strip sack on Diego Pavia on a RPO. That's how freaking good Kennard is. He strip sacked on an RPO. If you guys know what an RPO is, it's a quick release, right? Pavia had no more time to just token ride the fake, and he as soon as he reared up, that ball was being poked out. I mean, that's how fast he got there. It was like that, man. It was like a blink of an eye, and that left tackle stood no chance on that play, and that's when I knew it's like, oh boy. They're going to have to really get creative if they're going to win this game. So that was, well played by both teams. Well played by South Carolina. Like I said, I'll give them a lot of credit. Rocket Sanders was an absolute menace, and he's going to. I'm going to be excited about watching him in the league, and he's going to be, as long as he can stay healthy, I think he can find a good situation in the NFL and be a very productive NFL back. I mean, that guy's good, and hats off to you. So keys to the game, how did we fare overall offensively? We'll get to that next. What time is it? It's game time. Well, Game Time has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, right? So Gametime Picks, what it does is it filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. It sits it there for you, makes it super efficient, right? So Gametime Picks, again, the curation makes it super, super simple, right? Well, it doesn't matter what you're going to. You could be going to an NFL game, NBA game, minor league baseball, Nate Bargatze show. You could be going to a Luke Combs concert. It doesn't matter. That curation makes it easy and efficient to find those great seats, right? They have all-in pricing also, which means toggling this feature on shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And you get panoramic view from your seats in the app before you buy. That's an amazing feature. The lowest price guarantee also, and if it doesn't happen, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. All right, welcome back. It is segment number 3. We are wrapping up the show here on the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Thank you to the everydayers. And woo, you South Carolina people, man, I appreciated the engagement. I appreciated the views. I appreciate you coming along and enjoying this ride that we call Locked On Vandy. Hope some of you stay. Hope I inspired some of you to stay. If not, just hit me with just hit me with that little subscribe button. Whether you come back consistently or not, just hit me with that little subscribe button, and we'll love to keep you guys around. I think you guys were a fun group. Read all the comments. Those were good. A lot of insightful stuff. Some people talking smack, which I have fun with it as long as it's not personal. As long as we don't get personal and get into whatever, it's fun. Before, if it, like I said, if it doesn't get to that level. But anyway, talking to report card time. Okay, here we go. Here's how we did. All right. I said these were going to be the keys to the game. Control the game, control the clock, control the tempo, field position, all the above. All right. First half, I thought they did a better job of that. Second half, Vandy did not control it at all. I think South Carolina had the tempo on lock. As right before the second half, right before the second quarter ended, right before halftime, and then all throughout the second half, they had control of the game. They were getting chunk yardage. Their defensive line was having their way. So they had full control of the game, but I thought Vandy started the game off doing a good job of trying to establish control and establish their identity. They just couldn't hang on to it. Neutralizing the defensive line, not at all. Very few can, but I thought Vandy could schematically neutralize them or neutralize them enough to get a win. They did not, and it was not pretty. Forced South Carolina to drive, to score, limit explosive plays. Again, they started off the game doing really well, but depth came into play. As I said earlier, they did not limit explosive plays, especially in the second half. There was big chunk yardage all throughout this game, and then managed the mindset. I don't know if that was a factor at all. I just think that this team was just so exhausted it just didn't matter. So I don't know if there was any I don't think there was any strange things that happened because of this so-called curse or this streak. So I thought Vandy did a pretty good job with their mindset. It's just they just got tired. They just couldn't go. That's it. My hot take. It remains a piping hot take. They did not snap the 15-game losing streak to South Carolina. So there you go. Diego Pavia did not get a chance to do this as he's doing on the screen. But what it came down to offensively, I thought, again, it was kind of a vanilla game plan, I felt like. And I felt like they were trying – I don't know that Tim Beck had any answers for this defensive line. I don't know that he was I just don't know that he had too many solutions for that. I don't know that he was able to figure that group out because they were just so explosive. It just seemed like anything he did, they were just erasing, and they just couldn't get it going. And I think it was a little bit of throw your hands up like, I got nothing. And sometimes as a play caller, that play sheet, those plays just evaporate. There's just nothing there. And you can't, and it sometimes there's defenses like South Carolina's that just get you, right? They just got Vandy, and they made things confusing. They erased so many mistakes that it just became difficult to move guys around. It became difficult to send guys out. The passing game became difficult because you didn't have a whole lot of time to do anything down the field. And they did a good job of covering short. It just seemed like South Carolina was on top of everything Vandy wanted to do. Some of it schematically and scouting wise, and some of it was just because they just have dudes. And those dudes just made plays, right? So there was a combination of those things, and they just couldn't. Vandy's offense just didn't have a whole lot of answers for it. And there's going to be games like that, unfortunately. And Diego Pavia, his magic ran out a little bit. He couldn't. He's beat up, and he couldn't do what some of the things he normally does. Although the start of the game, he had a little bit of adrenaline going, and he was able to get it. But this defensive line caught up really quick, and so. Again, everything was funneled through South Carolina's defensive line. Everybody kind of just fed off of that, and that was that. That was all she wrote. And this offense, it's hard to judge this offense because they weren't able to do a lot of things, right? And I don't think they really got elaborate with the play calling because it felt like they thought it was pointless, and it felt like they just, I don't know if they threw up the white flag. It's not the right word. They didn't quit. So I don't want to say they threw up the white flag, but they were just like, okay, we're going to just try to get them with our base stuff and see what we can get going. And maybe we can just get some sort of momentum going and some sort of something. And they just couldn't, man. They just couldn't do it. For whatever reason, it just wasn't clicking. For whatever reason, they just didn't have a whole lot of answers for Stewart and Kennard. For a lot of reasons, they just, the DBs were on top of this receiving group, and some of the things that you were concerned with this Vandy offense, they were a big part of the problem tonight or in this game. And so this was something that Jerry Kill and Tim Beck are going to have to go and reflect on and say, okay, how can we overcome this lack of depth? How can we overcome this wide receiver group that we still don't know a lot about? How can we, get our guys better so that we can do what we do that helped us beat Alabama, that helped us beat Kentucky on the road, that helped us beat Auburn, helped us become bowl eligible after such an abysmal year last year? What can we do to get back to that? And so they're going to have to do some soul searching over there, maybe some long meetings, something. but they're going to have to do something to get things back on track if they want to improve their bowl slots. And something we'll have fun with talking about throughout this week, throughout this bye week, like what bowl games are attractive, like where do you want to go, what kind of matchups do you want to see, like what are some projections and things like that. But we'll get into that. But before we go, if you bet with me this weekend, you probably didn't make a lot of money. If you took this as a parlay, you're probably screaming at me right now. But Mississippi State, ironically, is the only one I think who covered 33-14. I think. Let me do the math on that because that might have been the only game we covered. Yeah, it's the only game we covered. Georgia got shellacked and Vandy got shellacked. Mississippi State's the only team that covered, ironically. So didn't do too hot on the picks this week with Georgia and with Vandy, but nonetheless, there's always next week, and this bye week is going to be kind of fun. I might do some extended picks and things like that. So what to expect this week? We're going to talk bowl games. We're going to break down scheme a little bit. We're going to talk about Vandy's next two opponents. We're going to, what are they looking like? LSU and Tennessee, like how are they shaking out towards the end of the season? Like how are they going to finish? And we might sneak in a little hoops, maybe. But until then, we'll see you back here on the next episode of the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you back here next time. Anchor down.